You've seen it happen. A woman spots a Sigma male, quiet, confident, completely unbothered, and something clicks inside her brain like a switch she can't turn off. She pursues him, hard. She adjusts her schedule, changes her behavior, rewrites her personality just to get his attention. And for a while, it feels like the most thrilling chase of her life. But here's what nobody talks about. What happens after she actually catches him? Because the moment she does, something shifts. The excitement evaporates. The regret sets in. And she's left asking herself one brutal question. What did I actually want from this man? This pattern plays out thousands of times every day across cities, cultures, and contexts. It's not specific to any particular type of woman or any specific age group. It cuts across boundaries because it taps into something fundamental about human psychology, attraction, and the stories we tell ourselves about love. Understanding why this happens requires digging beneath the surface of romantic narratives and examining the uncomfortable truths about what drives attraction versus what sustains relationships. Section 1. The Magnetic Pull. Why women can't resist Sigma males. To understand the regret, you first have to understand the obsession, and the obsession starts with one simple, undeniable fact. Sigma males operate on a completely different frequency than every other man a woman has ever encountered. Most men, when they're attracted to a woman, make it obvious. They pursue, they text first, they bend their plans, change their schedules, and perform endless acts of availability. Women can read this energy within seconds, and while it might feel flattering at first, familiarity breeds predictability, and predictability kills attraction. Then the Sigma walks in. He doesn't chase, he doesn't perform. He doesn't rearrange his life to earn her approval. He has his own world, his own goals, his own silence, his own code, and he lives by it completely. He's not rude, he's not arrogant, he's just genuinely indifferent to what she thinks of him. And that indifference acts like psychological catnip. Women are wired, through both biology and social conditioning, to value what is scarce and hard to obtain. When something is handed to them freely, the brain assigns it low value. But when something resists them, when something makes them work, the brain interprets that resistance as worth. The Sigma, without even trying, triggers this mechanism on autopilot. There's also the mystery factor. Sigma males don't overshare. They don't spill their emotional history on the first date or tell you their whole life story before the appetizers arrive. Their restraint reads as depth. Their silence reads as substance. Women fill the gaps with imagination, and imagination is always more compelling than reality. Add to this the Sigma's natural self-sufficiency. He doesn't need her to validate him, rescue him, or complete him. He's already whole. And paradoxically, a man who doesn't need a woman tends to make women feel a desperate, consuming need for him. She starts chasing not just the man. She's chasing the feeling of being chosen by someone who chooses so few. This creates a psychological dynamic that's almost impossible to resist. In a world where most interactions feel transactional and predictable, where dating often follows scripts and formulas, the Sigma male represents something genuinely different. He's not following the playbook. He's not trying to impress. He's not performing masculinity in the way she's learned to recognize and categorize. This unpredictability, this refusal to fit into expected patterns, makes him stand out in a way that feels significant, meaningful, and worth pursuing. The attraction intensifies because it feels earned rather than given. Every small moment of attention from a Sigma male carries disproportionate weight because it's rare. A text response that would feel ordinary from another man feels like a victory from him. A genuine smile, a moment of vulnerability, an hour of undivided attention. These become treasured data points that suggest she's making progress, that she's different, that she's breaking through. What she doesn't yet realize is that these moments aren't strategic breadcrumbs designed to keep her hooked. They're simply the natural rhythm of how a Sigma male operates. He engages when he feels like it, on his terms, according to his internal compass. There's no hidden agenda, no master plan to create attraction through scarcity. He's just being himself. But to her, every interaction feels loaded with potential meaning, and that perceived meaning fuels the obsession. Section 2. The chase itself. What women tell themselves while pursuing. Here's where it gets psychologically fascinating. When a woman is chasing a Sigma male, she's rarely honest with herself about what's actually happening. Instead, she constructs a very convincing internal narrative. A story that makes the pursuit feel romantic, intentional, and meaningful. She tells herself he's just guarded, that he's been hurt before, that under all that cold self-containment is a passionate, devoted man waiting for the right person to unlock him. She has cast herself as the one woman different enough, special enough, worthy enough to crack through the wall. It's a fantasy, and she believes it completely. This narrative is dangerous precisely because it feels so noble. She's not chasing him out of weakness, she tells herself. She's investing in him. She's being patient. She's seeing the real him that others are too shallow to notice. Every small gesture he makes, a half smile, a text replied to slightly faster than usual, an evening where he opens up even marginally, gets amplified in her mind into evidence that she's winning. She's making progress. The mission is working. Meanwhile, the Sigma is just being himself. He's not playing games. He's not strategically withholding affection to keep her hooked. He simply lives on his own terms, and those terms don't include reshaping himself around her expectations. But she doesn't see it that way. She sees a puzzle to be solved, a challenge to be conquered. There's also a social dimension happening in parallel. Chasing a Sigma male feels edgy, unconventional. He's not the safe choice. He's not the man her friends would select from a lineup and call dependable. Pursuing him feels like a statement about her own depth and complexity. Like choosing him says something interesting about who she is. She's not basic. She sees what others miss. And so the chase continues, fueled by fantasy, fed by intermittent reward, sustained by a story she's authored herself. She's invested now, emotionally, mentally, sometimes financially. The sunk cost makes walking away feel like failure. So she pushes forward, certain that the payoff is just around the corner. This phase can last weeks, months, sometimes even years. The longer it continues, the more elaborate the narrative becomes. She starts interpreting his behaviors through the lens of her desired outcome. His silence becomes evidence of his deep, thoughtful nature. His unavailability becomes proof that he's focused and ambitious. His emotional distance becomes a protective barrier she's uniquely qualified to dismantle. Every trait that might objectively register as a red flag or incompatibility gets reframed as a feature, not a bug, a challenge that makes the eventual victory more meaningful. Friends might express concern. They might point out that she's doing all the work, that he doesn't seem that interested, that she's changing herself to fit his world while he makes no reciprocal adjustments. But she dismisses these observations as surface-level thinking. They don't understand him the way she does. They don't see the moments of connection she sees. They're not patient enough to recognize that meaningful relationships take time to develop. What she's actually doing is creating a reality distortion field around the relationship, a bubble where normal rules and expectations don't apply because this situation is special, different, unprecedented. Inside this bubble, logic bends to accommodate hope. Evidence gets weighted selectively, and the investment continues to grow, making the eventual reckoning that much more devastating. Section 3. The moment she catches him. When reality replaces fantasy. This is the section nobody wants to talk about, because it dismantles something that feels unfair. The idea that effort and love should be rewarded with transformation. She caught him. After all the patience, the adjustments, the subtle performances of her best self, he's hers, or something close to hers. And for a brief, electric moment it feels like victory. She got the man that other women couldn't. The cold, self-contained, unreachable man actually let her in. Then Tuesday arrives, and Wednesday. And the man she's with is exactly the man he always was, because he never pretended to be anything else. He still disappears for days to work on his projects. He still cancels plans without theatrical apology when something more important to him comes up. He still doesn't flood her phone with good morning texts. He still processes his emotions internally, on his own timeline, without inviting her into the process. The mystery she fell for is still there, because it was never a wall waiting to be demolished. It's just his personality. This is where the regret begins its quiet, corrosive work. She realizes that what she mistook for depth was actually distance. What she interpreted as emotional complexity was emotional unavailability. What she called independence was, in the context of a relationship, a version of checked out. She didn't unlock him. She simply accepted a version of closeness that he defined entirely on his own terms. The loneliness sets in, not the loneliness of being alone. She has a man, but the specific, grinding loneliness of being with someone who doesn't need you the way you need them. She wants reciprocity. She wants warmth. She wants to feel chosen, not just tolerated. And the Sigma, to his core, cannot manufacture those things on demand. It's not cruelty, it's constitution. She also realizes something uncomfortable about herself. The traits she found so attractive during the chase are the exact traits that make the relationship feel hollow. His indifference was attractive when it was pointed at other women. Now it's pointed at her, and it feels like rejection on a slow, invisible drip. The fantasy version of him, the passionate, devoted man she imagined existed beneath the surface, turns out to be something she wrote herself. And no amount of love, patience, or emotional labor can bring a character to life who only existed in her own imagination. She didn't fall in love with the Sigma male. She fell in love with the story she told about him. And that story had an ending she didn't write. The daily reality of being in a relationship with a Sigma male is starkly different from the fantasy she constructed during the chase. She expected that once they were officially together, he would open up more, share more, need her more. She thought the relationship would deepen, that proximity would create intimacy, that commitment would unlock vulnerability. Instead, she discovers that his baseline remains unchanged. The space he maintained when they were dating is the same space he maintains now. The emotional autonomy that made him intriguing now makes her feel shut out. Conversations that she hoped would evolve into deep emotional exchanges remain surface level or logistical. When she tries to discuss feelings or relationship dynamics, he engages briefly but doesn't seem to process these conversations the way she does. There's no extended analysis, no rumination, no continued dialogue. He addresses the issue in the moment, considers it resolved, and moves on. Meanwhile, she's left wanting more processing, more reassurance, more evidence that he's as invested in the relationship's emotional architecture as she is. The regret compounds when she starts comparing this reality to what she gave up or passed over to be with him. She remembers men who pursued her enthusiastically, who made her feel desired and prioritized, who would have gladly reshaped their lives to accommodate her presence. At the time, those men felt too available, too eager, too predictable. Now, with the benefit of painful hindsight, their enthusiasm looks less like weakness and more like genuine affection. Their availability looks less like desperation and more like partnership. But she's in too deep now. She invested so much, emotionally, socially, temporally, that admitting the mismatch feels like admitting failure. So instead of leaving, many women in this position double down. They try to adjust their expectations. They tell themselves they're being too needy, too demanding, too conventional in their relationship requirements. They attempt to become more like him, more independent, more self-contained, more comfortable with distance. They try to win the relationship by needing it less. This strategy inevitably backfires. Trying to suppress your authentic needs in a relationship doesn't eliminate them. It just drives them underground where they resurface as resentment, anxiety, and a pervasive sense of dissatisfaction. She finds herself snapping at him over small things because she can't articulate the larger things. She becomes hypervigilant to perceived slights or signs of disengagement because she's operating from a place of chronic emotional undernourishment. The relationship that was supposed to be her greatest victory becomes a source of constant, low-grade unhappiness. Section 4. The real lesson. What the regret is actually trying to tell her. At this point in the story, most people make one of two mistakes. Either they blame the woman, she was naive, she ignored the signs, she created her own problem, or they blame the Sigma, he's broken, emotionally unavailable, incapable of real intimacy. Both of those conclusions miss the actual lesson entirely. The regret a woman feels after chasing and catching a Sigma male is not a punishment. It's information. And if she's honest enough to sit with it, It reveals something important about what she actually values versus what she was conditioned to find exciting. Because here's the truth that stings: attraction and compatibility are not the same thing. They never were. You can be intensely, almost painfully attracted to someone who is fundamentally wrong for you. The chase, the mystery, the emotional unavailability, these things activate the brain's reward circuitry the same way gambling does. Intermittent reinforcement is neurologically addictive. It's not a moral failing that she was drawn to it. It's how human brains work. But once she recognizes the pattern, she has a choice. She can keep chasing the high, keep mistaking emotional unavailability for depth, keep confusing indifference with confidence. Or she can start asking what she actually needs from a partner, not what she's conditioned to find thrilling, but what genuinely makes her feel secure, seen, and valued. For some women, this realization arrives gently through conversation and self-reflection. For others, it takes a relationship that hollows them out completely before the lesson finally lands. Either way, the message is the same. The things that make a Sigma male compelling to pursue are often the exact things that make him difficult to build a life with. This isn't a verdict against Sigma males. They are who they are, and they're not obligated to reshape their nature to fit someone else's romantic expectations. The problem was never the Sigma. The problem was the mismatch between the fantasy of who he might become and the reality of who he always was. The women who exit these situations with genuine growth aren't the ones who figured out how to finally change the Sigma. They're the ones who changed the question. Instead of asking how to make him need her, they started asking what kind of relationship would actually make her happy, and then being honest enough to admit whether this one qualified. That's the brutal truth buried inside the regret. It was never really about him. The chase was about her, about something unresolved in herself that found its perfect mirror in a man who seemed unreachable. And the regret, as uncomfortable as it is the beginning of figuring out what she was actually looking for all along. The pattern often reveals deeper psychological dynamics at play. Sometimes the attraction to emotionally unavailable men stems from childhood attachment patterns. Perhaps she had a parent who was inconsistently available, and she learned early that love means working hard to earn someone's attention and approval. Sometimes it's about self-worth. Choosing someone who doesn't fully choose her back confirms a core belief that she's not enough. Sometimes it's about control. If she can just crack the code, solve the puzzle, be perfect enough, she can make him love her the way she wants, which creates an illusion of power in a situation where she actually has very little. Understanding these underlying dynamics doesn't make the pain disappear, but it transforms it from a confusing, shameful experience into valuable self-knowledge. The regret becomes a teacher rather than a tormentor. It points toward the work she needs to do, not on him, not on the relationship, but on herself and her relationship patterns. The most powerful shift happens when she stops viewing the Sigma male as a prize to be won and starts viewing him as information about her own psychology. His existence didn't create her pattern. He simply activated it. And that activation, as painful as it was, gave her the opportunity to see something about herself she couldn't see before. Whether she uses that opportunity for growth or repeats the pattern with the next unavailable man she encounters is ultimately her choice. Here's the bottom line. Sigma males aren't villains in this story, and the women who chase them aren't victims. But attraction without self-awareness is a loop, and that loop will keep repeating until someone decides to break it. The cycle of pursuing emotionally unavailable partners only ends when the discomfort of staying in the pattern finally exceeds the discomfort of examining why you're drawn to it in the first place. That examination requires brutal honesty. It requires questioning narratives you've held about yourself and love. It requires sitting with uncomfortable truths about what you've been seeking in relationships and why. But on the other side of that examination is freedom. The freedom to choose partners based on actual compatibility rather than psychological compulsion. The freedom to recognize healthy availability as attractive rather than boring. The freedom to build relationships on mutual presence rather than the adrenaline of pursuit. The freedom to be yourself rather than performing the role of the one woman who can finally break through. If this video made you pause and think about your own patterns, that's not an accident. That discomfort is the work. The fact that something resonated, that you recognized yourself in these dynamics, that you felt defensive or called out or suddenly aware. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of change. Drop in the comments what hit hardest for you, because I guarantee you're not alone in it. Thousands of women and men navigate these patterns every day, often feeling isolated in their confusion. But these dynamics are remarkably common, and there's immense value in recognizing that your struggle isn't unique. It's human. And if you want more content that goes this deep, hit subscribe, because we're just getting started. Understanding relationship dynamics, attachment patterns, and the psychology of attraction requires going beneath surface-level advice and exploring the uncomfortable truths that actually drive behavior. That's the work we do here. And if you're ready for that level of honesty and insight, you're in the right place.